welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Torchwood episode Fear Itself, written by Everett D. Rauch and Graham Farmer, and is directed by Carl Swiggy. This story sees the crew of K9 come up with... I really don't understand. Is it the concept of fear? Is it fear itself personified as an entity? I honestly don't understand. As I do, I usually talk about like the popular opinions on this. However, nobody has seen this show except for me. I do generally believe sometimes that whilst watching this show that I am the only living person in reality that even intends to watch this series to the end. And yeah, the story does actually have a pretty interesting idea in it, as K9 becomes incredibly curious about emotions, where he basically learns about the emotion of fear, and he basically wants to experience them himself. And so all of our characters kind of like help him. We kind of get this lovely bond relationship in this episode. Now, for those of you who might remember my last vlog, I did state that the last episode, the Sirens of Ceres, if I remember it's called, though not good, that one was easily the best episode so far. This one has easily overtaken it. It might even be more of a mess, but it has atmosphere. Oh boy, does it have atmosphere. This story, director Carl Swiggy, he brings the usual look to the series. He previously directed the episode, I believe it's the Corvin episode, which I stated that episode surprisingly has some pretty interesting directing style compared to the rest of the K9 series. And here he is given a script which is mainly focused on horror elements, with the idea of fear itself becoming this thing. But that's kind of confusing in terms of it. But that does mean that the story gets to play around a lot with the visual style, and because of that, it does have a very unique look compared to the rest of the series. Now, the first opening act in this story is so strange, so oddly paced, and so bizarre, but I was going into this episode after the first few minutes and going, right, this story is... We've gone back to episodes which are a complete and utter mess and have no idea what the hell it wants to achieve. We start off the story with Daryl. He gets attacked by these two hobo people who basically they start like scaring him, talking about the boogeyman, seemingly threatening him, while Darius tries to be like all jokey and stuff. And then they lock him in this cabinet in this junkyard. And all of a sudden, from Darius's point of view, he starts, the entire room closet becomes far larger on the inside, and he's grabbing on for dear life on the railing, on the coat hanger railing, and like he's absolutely terrified and petrified himself. We then cut to Starkey and Professor Griffiths, who are acting really strange. They seem a bit jumpy, they seem a bit curious about their own emotions, and they like, you can feel it too. There's this overwhelming like paranoid fear that's running everywhere. And we get these clips on the news where basically London is in tatters. We get people rioting across the streets, although we never actually see any riots. We just see, from an aerial point of view, a few flames, and basically all hell's kicking off. Kind of feels like a finale story in that sense. It's the last story on the first disc. If you're getting this volume 1 of the series. It's the last episode on disc 1, which is a 2-disc set. So I don't know if there was gaps and there was an intention for it to be like a finale episode, but it does feel like the stakes are higher in this sometimes. Yeah, it's really strange. This story sets up this idea of mass panic and hysteria, seemingly caused by absolute nothing, but seemingly fear spreading across London, and that just gets sidelined to the background. We never see, with the exception of maybe the hobos, this disease of fear, this pandemic of people turning into fear. We get a scene in which Professor Griffiths basically explains that he's noticed a pattern in history where people become, basically there are these mass hysterias where people just panic and fear and riot, and it causes just, a complete meltdown in civilization, and it seems to be like a repeating thing, and it just seems like an inevitable for people to continue on through this. So it seems like an inevitable force, this disease, and it seems like that's what our heroes are going to conquer. But no, that's not the plot at all. And there's also a mention of 1665, where they mention the poisonous rat, and then the Black Death, and then the fires of London, which this story makes it out as like people did that because they were scared and fearful. However, as we know as Doctor Who fans in the story Visitation, the Fifth Doctor Adventures, it was actually the Fifth Doctor's fault that we have the Fire of London to begin with, after he had a battle with the Pterodactyls. But so that's kind of strange, and that's really like the best that we get of this pandemic plot. There's this massive plot in the background that does not get mentioned, and it's really strange and bizarre. It feels like our characters talk about at the start. It's like there's this fear going around, and Darius then comes running in, somehow surviving his encounter. It kind of explained later on. He points to he's like, I just had this really weird experience. I got attacked by these two homeless people. They locked me in this box, which was actually controlled by aliens. And so the characters then, they basically try to explain that, because they look on the news, and the homeless people basically opened the door again after him and basically said that they saved him from these aliens. And then the bad guy, who I've written down in my notes, his name is Drake, the bad guy that appears in a few episodes of K9. His name is Drake, which is a hilarious name for our main villain. And he comes onto the news set and he basically turns the cameras off. So there's something to it, apparently. But our characters keep stating, no, it's not. It's just people fearing, and it's all people's emotions just going mad. And we've got to keep telling ourselves there's nothing there. There's nothing real. And K9, he's like, fear? What is fear? I don't understand the point of this. And the enjoyment I get when K9 has some really genuinely funny dialogue where these characters are talking about emotions, and K9's just like, I give up. And he's just like, he just does not interest him in that regard, because he's like, he just does not understand the concept of emotions. And this is where the episode's strength lies on, with our characters actually trying to teach K9 the ideas of emotions and what they are to represent. There's a great scene in which Our characters try to scare K9, and he's just like, that's interesting. Oh, how amusing! That's some really fun costumes you've got there. And the character said, "Come on, aren't you even a little frightened? I mean, the costumes and stuff are terrible, and nobody in their right mind would have been scared by that, especially a robotic, logical K9 computer. But with the exception of that, the story has this really strange tonal stuff about it. Drake seems to be absolutely fearful, terrified by this, by the wardrobe that was in the junkyard that Daryl was in. In fact, he's so petrified that, like, you see him, he's like shouting at it. It's like, I'm not afraid of you! Giving off some really hammer jokey performances. And we actually get a scene in which it's like the door opens and a hand like pops out. So it is aliens. Yes? No? There's a scene in which K9 basically is like, so there isn't a monster in there. It is an alien. And K9 and all the characters are like, there is and also there isn't. On a logical scale, you have 1 and 0s, either yes or no. But with emotions, you can kind of get in between those 1s and 0s, and things aren't always as clear. It doesn't really matter what's in that wardrobe or not. What matters is the belief that people have about that fear. That is actually a really great concept and reminds me of stories like Ghostlight, which I really love, where you have this overarching mystery, this strange dimensional concept, the Schrodinger's cat, but we never really get an explanation for it. It might be cheap, it might technically be a criticism, but I personally love stuff like that. And so that's why when I said earlier on that this story is actually my favourite K9 episode so far, I do genuinely believe it. I love the fact that we don't actually get a true answer to whether the thing in the wardrobe is an actual entity or not. Whether Drake and Daryl are actually witnessing aliens and the room getting bigger, or whether it's just completely in their mind. As we later learn that Drake has a fear of clothes. He's claustrophobic. He has a fear of small spaces, and that Drake is always he's xenophobic against aliens. So he basically believes that there is this alien encounter, and it's also pushed further when Starkey, Georgie, and Daryl, they basically go in to investigate just to be on the safe side that it's not aliens and it's not their madness, and they go in. There's a scene where they open the door, Daryl holds the railing again, and then the room starts expanding and everyone can see it, including K9. So it must be real, right? But the story is still like juggling. It's like, oh no, it's in your head. And also, I feel like this idea, this really interesting idea, is kind of difficult to enjoy when you have this plot in the background of everyone being fearful, because that plot line just like never gets brought up again. It never gets resolved. Like by the end of the episode, we don't know if is everyone cured by the end of it and people still rioting themselves to death. Was it because of this strange entity, this fear entity, or was it not? We generally don't get any true answer. We can kind of speculate, but you don't actually get any answers. And I personally actually really appreciate this story for doing that. But it's like that's all out of the way, and it's kind of like pushed in the side. Like this story feels like it should be personal. If I was a script editor on this show, the first thing that would be gone is the fact that this story is happening all around London. Just keep it to our main characters and make it seem like it's all in their head, because that is the most fascinating aspect. However, the story then kind of like has this really strange tone where Starkey was one of the people like kind of infected, and he talks to K9 that like, you know, you can't let fears control you. You just have to state that that it's not real in your head. And he gets captured by Drake after he breaks into the junkyard again to try and get into the closet. Also, I don't know if a cabinet-sized, it's a cabinet wardrobe, I do apologise, whether this small little box thing in a junkyard that's bigger on the inside from Daryl's point of view, whether that's a reference to an unearthly child? Could be. It would be interesting to get some Doctor Who references in here. And so he gets captured by Drake, and then all of a sudden there's like the scene where he interrogates Starkey. Starkey's character completely changes, and there's no explanation for it. He just kind of becomes this much more serious character, and he really becomes really confrontational with Drake, and it's just like, you just want to believe that there's aliens. It's all in your head. I don't fear things anymore. And the actor that plays him gives off this really undertoned performance, which is just so bizarre, and really it's an issue. It's really like hinders on the plot and the story. I feel like the story was trying to give him a character arc, however, they didn't know like where like each little beat, so they kind of just have him become the character he needs to be at the end for K9. That he is the one that conquers the fears, and he kind of just like shames like that. It's really bizarre. However, the fact it's bizarre makes the story really interesting, and I was watching this entire story with lots of me just going, what the hell am I watching? Moments. Again, this story reminds me a lot like Ghostlight. It's nowhere near as good as Ghostlight. The production value, of course, is nowhere as gorgeous as Ghostlight. Can I just stop talking about fear itself and just talk about how amazing Ghostlight is again? I know I talk about it too much, but my God, that story really, there's just something magnetic about it. But anyway, and so K9, he goes into the closet, and it all opens up again, and K9 tries to find out what's at the bottom of it, and K9 starts feeling fearful for the first time. I don't understand how he gets fearful, whether, I can't remember if Professor Griffiths programmed him so that he can now experience emotions. They have been talking about that throughout the entire episode, however, I don't actually remember them actually implanting it. Even there's a scene in which K9 is basically asking the professor, can he have emotions, and the professor's like, he's basically debating, and it's like, it's really hard to do, almost impossible. And K9's just like, in that case then, just close me up and finish the job, and he puts his head down. My heart's like, oh, K9! K9! However, K9's character here is a bit cliched, a robot that wants to know emotions. That doesn't sound like another science fiction character from a very popular sci-fi show, doesn't it? But anyway, so K9 goes down and he sees actually his fears with this really interesting bit in terms of directing. I really do enjoy this moment where he goes down and basically all the other characters are seeing what he's seeing on the camera, what like an actual visual image of the camera, which then actually means that the widening of space is actually there. So this wardrobe, this cabinet must be extraterrestrial in nature, must be multiple dimensions carrying. It's gotta be. But I love it just doesn't give like a proper answer. But anyway, K9 goes down and he starts seeing jinxes. He actually sees like a jinx warrior like coming up towards him, and K9 is just like scared. He starts shaking, his head starts like vibrating, and all the characters are looking at the screen and they don't see anything. From their point of view, it's just complete blank. And what I really liked is a scene in which K9 is trying to like focus, and we see on the screen that he's focusing, but Professor Griffiths and Daryl make it clear that from dialogue that they're just seeing a blank screen. But we as the viewing audience see what K9 is seeing. That is glorious. I will admit, that is some really nice visuals. Right, my God, I'm actually really enjoy this. And Starkey and Geordie, who are up in the junkyard, they basically discover that Drake, as well as some Robocops, have found a alien detonation bomb which will destroy any extraterrestrial life. With K9 being in it, it could destroy K9. And so they basically start planting the bomb in it, and Drake is just like, if it destroys K9, it's collateral damage I can live with. So they start setting the bomb, and Starkey and Geordie, they're looking on the screen, it's like, it's cracking up, the visuals are not coming on. It's like, how are we going to come in to K9? How are we going to let him know that this bomb is going to come off? I know we have to run to Professor Griffiths and run to Daryl to try and warn him about the bomb. So they start lagging at this bomb comes down, and K9 is basically shaking in fear, and he hears Starkey's voice and how it's like, K9, don't worry, it's just fear. You just gotta keep telling yourself that it's not real, that and that these emotions are actually like a sixth sense. And K9 talks himself out of seeing the Jinx warrior there, as well as feeling that the bomb is going to be set off, and so he escapes and he reunites with our main characters, and the story ends with all our characters having a group hug as they're basically glad that K9 survived this and is slowly learning the ideas and feeling the capability of emotions. So there you go, that's Fear itself. Overall, easily the best episode of K9. I actually really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun and lost a blast. But that's mainly because the story leaves me in such a confused state, with things in the background that don't get brought up again, with ideas that cedar in and plays with our emotional intent, but does really nothing for it. And it's just a really confusing mess. But there's something about the atmosphere, the idea of having such a strange, complicated plot like this, in a horror aspect, in a horror atmosphere, just really always works for me. I don't know, maybe I just wrote really horrible writing when it's seemingly that horrible writing kind of has this intent of giving us a creepy atmosphere. And so I actually recommend this to people who like stuff like that, like Ghostlight, who I am a active defender of. Although it's nowhere near as good as Ghostlight. It still has a lot of issues. Our characters are still as interesting as they ever been in K9 so far. And it's still very weak and very bad. I forgot to mention as well, the ending of the story has another weird Drake moment with the Sirens of Caress. Drake, the bad guy, he has a really weird moment, and here he kind of has another weird moment, nothing like that. At the end, after he set the bomb in it, he goes back to the cabinet, which seemingly is unharmed after he's just had a bomb inside it. And Drake is just like, I'm not afraid of you, I've defeated you, I'm not afraid of you! And he takes off his glove, revealing that he has a robot hand. We've been hearing throughout the story that he has like these robot movements. And he punches the cabinet, it bursts into a million pieces, and then you see like this like particle effect with this voice coming out. I can't remember what it says. I might have just laughed or just muttered something, but it basically implies that the cabinet anyway was a fear entity. Implied, not actually stated, which again I kind of love. So yeah, Fear itself, a really enjoyable story, even if the enjoyment mainly just comes down to me liking when shit writing just goes off the walls and leads into some really spooky and strange atmosphere. It's just, the story just hits me in all the right notes. So that's Fear itself. So join me next time when the Doctor starts investigating as an old enemy comes out to play. So join me next time for the Code of the Crinitane. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!